like you all to think of some questions. I'm going to introduce two more members, but while I do so, please think of your questions. We've also got a Facebook Live page, so you can see our Facebook handle here. So if you're shy about asking questions, please ask it through our Facebook Live page by logging on there with your devices. And the two other members I'd like to introduce who are also experts in our audience today are Miss Anita Gorry, who's an Associate Genetic Counsellor from Monash Health. And I'm just inviting her to introduce herself and potentially talk a bit about pregnancy testing and the current status of testing for sickle cell disease. Sorry, oh, there we go, great, fantastic. Thanks, Anita.
Hi everyone, so I'm a genetic counsellor at Monash Hospital and one of my main roles is working with pregnant patients or people planning pregnancy who are at risk of thalassemia or sickle cell disease. We do a lot of screening for all of our patients there. And talking to them about their options during a pregnancy or pre-pregnancy or post-pregnancy.
Fantastic, thanks Anita. So feel free to ask any questions as well directed to Anita. And the last person I'd like to acknowledge from the audience is Dr. Luke Gahan, who's a research fellow with the Blood Services Unit, who are always keen to look at new donors in relation to treatments for sickle cell disease. So, sorry, Luke. Fantastic, thank you.
Hi everyone, and congratulations on your launch today. As you will have heard today, blood transfusion is one of the most important methods for treating sickle cell. And just like with bone marrow, people who receive transfusions for both thalassemia and sickle cell often end up requiring blood that's closely matched to their own. And that's increasingly becoming an issue as we diversify our population. As you've heard today, we need to start diversifying the people who actually donate blood to the blood service. So there's a number of research projects at the blood service looking at diversifying our donor panel. But I guess our most important message today is if you have family members who are able to donate, or yourself, we'd love to see you at the blood service, and we've got some information out there today too to help you sign up to donate blood. And when you donate blood, you can also register for the bone marrow registry as well.
Great, thank you very much, Luke. So I'd now like to open the floor up to questions. So if anyone would like to start us off, if you just raise your hand and I shall come find you and try and direct your question to the most relevant panel member. Fantastic, thank you.
Hi everyone, welcome to the panel, thank you. Agnes, congratulations on today and congratulations to the sickle cell community in Victoria. As one of the very mature adults with beta thalassemia major in Victoria, I can attest that there is a long, long history to haemoglobinopathy in this state and in Australia. And one of the things that just comes back to me time and time again is that the awareness and the understanding of haemoglobinopathies follows Australia's immigration patterns. So having been born in the early 1970s, not long after Theo, we had a wave of haemoglobinopathy being identified in Victoria and in Australia. And today, 40, 50 years on, that wave is continuing and there's a second stage to it. I would like to provide some acknowledgement of that, and that in 50 years we still haven't had sufficient research and studies on the correlation between Australia's immigration and these conditions coming up in our community. But attached to that, we still haven't got effective carrier screening programs. And carrier screening programs are really the beginning and the end of a lot of this, because we can control what is happening in the community in terms of family planning with carrier screening. So that's something that in my lifetime I would like to see as a serious contemplation in this whole sector in relation to hemoglobinopathy. Also, I'd like to point out that the provision of treatments, therapies, access and equity has not occurred in Australia without the work of people like Agnes, but 50 and more years ago of people like Theo's parents and my parents that fought for basic transfusion medicine and then some iron chelation therapies. So desferoxamine, which is as good as a cure 50 years ago, did not exist in this country without the lobbying of mums and dads selling fruitcakes in the front of the Royal Children's Hospital. Also, apheresis exchange was a pipe dream in Australia even 15 years ago. And the apheresis machine out at Monash Southern Health Medical Centre, which is managed by Caroline over here, very well, was only brought into the country because patients and families raised money and paid for it themselves. So we've seen evidence provided by Anthea that apheresis exchange is a game changer for treatment and the avoidance of comorbidities around sickle cell disease. But the actual technology and the functional elements of it didn't occur without consumer-driven and patient-driven, impetus. So I'd just like to acknowledge that and thank you to Agnes for introducing a new generation of sickle cell disease awareness. It's so important. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Louisa. Are there any other questions? Excellent.
Thank you very much. My name is Kabaso. I'm from the Zambian community, so I know Agnes through that. But also I'm a sufferer of thalassemia minor. Today I'm here on my individual capacity, but I've come with a few colleagues from the RMIT, we're nurse educators, and we're just interested in what you plan, for disseminating this information. Agnes and I have been chatting, and she's got a friend in Zambia whose child had a bone marrow transplant, and that just happens to be my sister-in-law. Therefore, the children that had the transplant in India, they are cousins to my children. So we are very much interested in how you hope to disseminate this information, and also just to say, as Zambians and interested people, we are interested in knowing which areas of research you seek so that we can render any help.
Thank you very much. So is there anyone from the panel that would like to respond to that? I believe that's a question directed more to the ACER as an organisation. Agnes, did you want to respond? Or no? Okay, so I'll hand it over to Anthea.
I think there's a number of strategies. I think it involves sort of lobbying at medical school, nursing school, sort of educational levels to make sure it's in the curriculum. But I think that the first step is actually things like the data and the demographics, because often we have to justify, our capacity to educate people about how common a problem this is. So I think all of those things are linked. But I think this sort of organisation and groups of interested clinicians who are able to mobilise support is really important. I think the genetic screening and having sort of a presence in genetic screening of newborns is also important, because that highlights for many clinicians, medical, nursing, other, that that's an important problem that people need to know about when they're coming through as trainees.
Fantastic, thanks Anthea. So were there any other questions from the audience? Yes? Oh, I'll start with this one, sorry, we'll start here. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Mohammed Al-Musawi, and I've got my son Hussein Al-Musawi, who was born in Shepparton, Victoria, which is a country town in Victoria. Hussein was diagnosed with sickle cell anemia at birth in Shepparton, and Hussein has been pretty up and down throughout, and he's been looked after by Dr. Anthea Greenway, who has been fantastic. I just wanted to say that how can we improve the knowledge of nurses at the hospitals outside of the Royal Children? Because the nurses have no idea. Every time we go to the emergency department in Shepparton, they struggle because they put Hussein in and they think, like, you know, they look at his respiratory system and look at his temperature, and if it seems okay, they put him as a category 1, and then he's just sitting there. At one time, when Hussein was 9 months old, we were there for nearly 6 hours at ED, and then when Hussein was seen by the doctors, he was airlifted to this hospital, or actually the older hospital, the Royal Children, before it was turned into here. And the nurse came in and apologised because she had no knowledge. She had no idea, and she, very lack. Until today, even Hussein was born at that hospital, they have no idea. 2 weeks ago, I rang the hematologist and Anthea answered the phone because we were at ED for nearly 4 hours and Hussein was not seen, and they said he could be there for another 4 or 3 hours at least. And when he was seen, he was admitted to hospital and he wasn't released till 4 days later. So obviously he had a problem. I'm just wondering if, somehow we can get that knowledge out to the nurses, especially, to let them know that there is a condition that does exist in Australia and it needs to be apprehended or attended to. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that. So I can definitely attest as a board member that one of the key issues we're focusing on is education, awareness and research. And in terms of awareness, education and research, that's not just to potential patients out there, but also trying to create more awareness amongst the medical community who may be exposed to people who have sickle cell disease. So in terms of GPs, haematologists or anyone who might come in touch with patients, and also prenatal screening. So sorry, Agnes, did you want to add anything to that? Yep.
Thank you. Well, one of the things that we've discussed as an association is for us to engage with the GPs. So we want to start with the local GPs in Victoria and see how we can engage with them, but also with the clinicians. And we've started, it's a lot of red tape to get through to the hospitals. So that's something that we are trying to focus on and see if we can have contact persons in different hospitals. And yes, clinicians' education is one of the things that we've faced over the years as well. But that's something that's top on our list.
Thank you very much. So I believe we've got one question waiting up the back there in the audience. Thank you.
Good morning all, my name is Chantal. I'm originally from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and I was just looking at this leaflet and I could see that the statistics from a country where I come from is quite high with people with sickle cell. I'll start by thanking Agnes and the team and all the doctors who are doing fantastic work. Growing up in the DRC, which is the Democratic Republic of Congo, it's like growing up in a home, like in a hospital. So I've lost a couple of brothers to sickle cell, and information is power, knowledge is power. If we had known even the little bit that I know today, maybe we could have saved some lives. So my question is to doctor. The doctor has got a lot of knowledge. I wish I could take you in my home and my understanding is that there are different types of sickle cell. They are what they call IS and then SS. Can you explain that to me? And also, I just want to put a couple of questions here because can save some time. When somebody's got a wound, I've seen someone's got a wound, but they're not healing. The wound does not heal because of the disease, and they've taken a lot of muscle from different part of the body to close that wound, but it healed and it comes back again. My third question is why is it we're not putting the blood testing of sickle cell at GP when you go and do your blood test? If that could be another component of that. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. So there are different types of sickle cell disease. So there's SS, S beta and SC are three of the most common, but a large number. We know that if you have one copy of the sickle cell gene and then you get a second copy that affects any of those different types of haemoglobin, then the combination can produce what we know as sickle cell disease collectively. So there are different types. There is a little bit of variation in terms of how that can present in the patient, and the different types of complications are related to the haemoglobin that the patient inherits. But that's sort of the basics of it, but all of those three are together. Yep. Wound healing is a problem for patients with sickle cell. It's because of that problem when we can't get the oxygen to the skin to help the wound heal. So that's one of the things that we need to treat, and many of those treatments I mentioned can be used to help with wound healing, but it is a problem as we get older. Yep. Excellent, yeah. So, look, the challenge, so really what we need is neonatal screening, so where we screen babies on day 3. Many of you who've had children will remember on day 3 they have a heel prick, and we do lots of spots on a little filter card that is then tested for a number of genetic lesions. Certainly when I was a medical student there was a small number of things we tested for. That's been rapidly expanded, and I suspect in the next few years with some lobbying from groups such as Asca and help from our members of parliament, this may well be something that we can get on the screening program. It's always a risk-benefit analysis from a sort of government point of view in terms of how common is the gene and how likely are we to see that. What I would encourage you to do is if you or family members are aware that there's a history of sickle cell disease, or you're from one of the countries I've mentioned where the gene frequency is quite high, that is mentioned if family members are thinking about having their own family, because knowing your sickle cell status is really important if you are from one of those countries. The problem we have is that unless you specifically test with a special test called a haemoglobinopathy screen or haemoglobin electrophoresis, for many patients who have just one copy of the gene, who is a carrier, an S carrier, the full blood count that your GP might do for other reasons will not show any signs that you're a carrier. So it has to be specifically tested for and specifically requested by the GP or the doctor doing it. So that's the sort of challenge and why it's often missed. Can I make one more comment? So just to respond to the comment we had before, what I wanted to say, and I haven't done so far, is that it is challenging to get the information to every single person who is, obviously trying to care very much for their patients when you meet them in the emergency department of the hospital. For many of our families, you will be the most knowledgeable person about sickle cell, okay? And so we need your advocacy. We need you to go to that place and say, this is the situation, I know a lot about this condition, I really need your help. And as a clinician, I always rely on my families and my patients to be an advocate for their child. We need to hear what you need and what the issues are. We may not always be able to respond as immediately as we would like, but that is usually the intent for most of the interactions that we have. I think that, part of the working with the group will be to make sure we set up networks. There is always help available, so patients should always feel as though they can contact their treating centre, and the clinicians there can always feed back to some of our rural centres that may have less experience. But I think, don't be afraid to stand up for what you know is what needs to happen, and you're all very well educated and you know what sort of needs to happen from there. So make sure you're the best advocates, and the medical fraternity and medicine and nursing, we're really grateful when I have a family say, this is what I know needs to happen from the person who looks after me. So make sure you share that information. It's really important.
I was just going to make a follow-up comment about the haemoglobinopathy screening. In the US, as you all know, that is standard practice that all babies have haemoglobinopathy testing, and within the cord blood bank, before we can release a cord blood unit, we have to do haemoglobinopathy testing, but the testing is so expensive here in Australia, we will only do it just prior to release, unless there's a family history or the region that a donor has come from puts them at a slightly higher risk, then we will do the screening. But so it is quite different to what we have here in Australia, and I guess that's
traditionally because of the demographics of the population, which clearly is changing in Australia. So.
Thank you very much. Look, in the interest of time, we realise everyone's got a busy day ahead and we have promised to close at 9:30. So I'd like you all to give a warm round of applause to our panel members. And I believe we have some gifts for our panel members. I think Agnes's children are going to come up and present those. And while they do that, I'd just like to mention, yes, apologies if we had to cut the panel session short due to time. We really want to address any questions you have, so if you could please go onto our website, find our email address. There are LinkedIn social media profiles. Please email through any questions you have. Also, I believe some of our panel members will be lingering around after the event, so you're also welcome to ask any questions after the event. While we're getting, some photos taken of our expert panel member, I'd like to invite our board chairman of Asca, Joseph, to come up and say a few final words before we close officially. Thank you.
It's been an amazing day. Without your presence, your sacrifices, and your gifts, we wouldn't have been able to make it through to today. Special thanks to our key sponsors, CSL. Had the opportunity to have a chat with Michael Wilson, the Vice President. We're so grateful for your gifts. It's helped us in this regard. Also remembering our speaker, the Honourable Murray, Federal Member of Parliament, for your keynote address. I would also want to appreciate the executive team of the Australian Sickle Cell Advocacy Group. They've been very supportive of the work Agnes has been doing. So if you could please stand up for recognition. Executive Committee, please a round of applause. These individuals have sacrificed months of hard work to put this event together. We're very, very grateful for your support. The panelists seated here, Peter, Claire, Robin, Agnes, you didn't sit on that, obviously. Greer and Dr. Luke, who is not here, obviously. To the University of Melbourne for their support, the Red Cross Blood Services. Dr. Antia Greenway, the Zambian High Commissioner to Australia, was ably represented here today by Mr. Morgan. Thank you for your presence also. Dr. Maggie won so many hearts for the association. Deep thanks for your support, also for the photography and the many things you do, being a coach to Agnes, and so many wonderful things you've done for this association. Dr. Sarah, can we put our hands together? A round of applause for, she's been the compere for today. Doing an amazing job. And to everyone that has supported us in one form or the other, for coming out here in the cold of winter, and also for participating in a very dynamic group this has been, for your insightful questions and views and perspectives. Let's keep the conversation going. And I believe that the sky is even the starting point. A round of applause to Agnes. Agnes, can you stand up once again? It's so much she's had to go through. From the family front, but even getting the association to move forward from the corporate governance, getting the board together. I also want to appreciate the board members. If you stand up for recognition. So they put their reputation, put their time together to make sure today is a success. So without so much ado, thank you again and wish you a great day.